Hello, welcome to our presentation about the economic crisis from 2007 to 2008. Our team is composed by Mildred Naomi, Andrea Colin, Samantha Fonseca, Diego Gomez, Ian Ceron, Edgar Hernandez, Yael Sanchez, and me, Moises Romano. Our research consists of explaining how the United States, a world power, suffered what we call an economic crisis. We will discuss the causes and effects of this crisis.
Colin Morales, and this is my partner Yael Sanchez, and we are going to give you a little introduction of our project, that is the great economic crisis that USA suffered. So it's called the Ham Brothers. Which began to identify in August 2007. With the unexpected bankruptcy of some minority investments banks. Some of the various international specialists call crisis of developing countries. So if I am going to give you a really good introduction, I'm going to give you a little concept that is economic crisis. The economic crisis is the deterioration in the economic state of the country, manifested in the significant decline in the production, violation in the existing product relations, and bankruptcy of enterprises, and rising in unemployment. And then my partner, Yael Sanchez.
Now how did it start? During the second semester of 2008, one of the most serious economic and financial crises was unleashed since there was the Great Depression, or also known as the crisis of 29. The American crisis spread very quickly in the areas of Europe and in the many emerging markets, which witnessed how the decoupling that had been talked about in the past was a simple myth. The economic crisis of 2008 had become a great crisis that usually goes beyond the sphere of the economy.
So that is all of our part, and
Well, my name is Edgar, and I'm gonna talk about the causes. The outbreak of the mortgage crisis in the United States in mid-2007 does not seem to have significantly affected the course of the world economy until mid of 2008, which continued maintaining high growth rates over 5%. But the crisis was not only the result of an overaccumulation of capital in leading sectors, but also of the growing disconnection between the new financial economy, colossal, and the dimension of the real economy, social demand, and productive investment in the United States and in the most in the world. In the beginning of the new century, the great overaccumulation of money capital tended to focus on a new type of deregulation banking system, potentially existing since the reigns of computer capitalism and neoliberal globalization. From the deep contradiction between the strange and dynamism of global production and the new knowledge economy, and the fragility of an anarchy financial system. And the new financial system was established from the set of new phenomena systematically integrate with each other: the securitization and the regulation of credit, the computerization of money circulation, financial globalization, derivative financial instruments, and four of the new speculative investment funds, and the enormous private income enrichment of large sectors of the world population favored by globalization.
The severity of the mortgage crisis in the United States didn't lie in the size of the mortgage market and its weakest link, the magnitude of subprime or low credit rating loans, but in its relationship with the new financial system and the mechanisms of integration into it. The United States was the original center of the new financial system of credit securitization, of financial globalization. Also the country that had the highest rates of financial deepening, relationship between financial assets and GDP, greater weight of derivative instruments, and in particular from the crisis of 2001 to 2002, of its most dangerous forms of contagion characteristic of the shadow banking system that incorporate lethal mechanisms of diversification and transmissions of systematic risk on a large scale throughout the financial system and the economy, as we shall see. In the section Collateralization and Structuring of Credit, hidden banking system and dynamics of the crisis of first part. During the second half of 2008, one of the most serious economic and financial crises since the Great Depression, or also known as the crisis of 29, was unleashed. It was caused by the collapse of the mortgage market in the United States and the collapse of large financial institutions such as the largest investment banks, which have now been transformed into the so-called commercial banks in order to have access to the resources of the Federal Reserve, and also the largest insurance company in the United States, called EEG.
Now we are going to talk about the effects of this crisis. The economic crisis of 2008 has come to affect different countries in USA, Latin America, and Europe. General Assembly of the Great United Nations Organization, known as the UN, which in lead came to call the crisis as last just effect. The origin of this phenomenon was in the United States and later spread through all the world.
In the USA, the different repercussions of the mortgage crisis began to manifest themselves in a very serious way since the beginning of 2008, only affecting the great financial system of the United States and later the international system, having as consequence a very deep liquidity crisis and indirectly caused other types of economic phenomena throughout the world, such
as we can see, is the global food crisis, the different stock market crashes, example of the stock market crisis in January 2008, and also the stock market crisis worldwide in October of the same year, 2008. In addition to a great economic crisis on an international scale.
Now Latin America. In Brazil, it is still today continues to suffer consequences in the devaluation of the currency. As for example, a few years ago, the real went from 1.80 for every dollar to 2.12 in just less than 1 month. This has been a drastic change in relative prices and also in profit margins.
In Mexico, the 2008 economic crisis became the worst financial recession in the history of this country in the last 70 years. According to the result, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, known by in the acronym as the UESD, the contradiction of the GPD of the Mexican country for the 2009 was 8%. The kind of slowdown in the United States and also Mexico's financial dependence on its northern neighborhood were the causes of the growth of the effects of this crisis. To this panorama and added the events that occurred in the intention of the nation, like the epidemic of influenza A, which was the H1N1, which came to seriously affect the Mexican country in the month of April of 2009.
Now Europe. The Great European Central Bank, known by its acronym ECB, was not able to foresee the economic crisis. In the case of Denmark, it entered a state of recession in the first quarter of 2008, for which it had about 6 consecutive months of net economic growth.
Now France. France had financial stepbacks of 0.3% and followed by Germany with 0.3%. The large construction sector in Spain was one of the most affected by the 2008 economic crisis due to the end of the real estate boom and the fall in subsequent sales prices. In the course of 2008, large and numerous construction companies came to present the suspension of payments.
The economy of Portugal comes to suffer great consequences directly when a type of deterioration occurred that began to be noticed in the main macroeconomic indicators of the Republic of Portugal, which began in 2011, and they have spread until 2014, and which was expanded not only economically but also politically and socially.
The nation of Greece is a country that has come to suffer more in the course of economic crisis. The Greek government had come to issue a large sum of public debt in order to finance what was its public deficits. The type of level of debt began to be something very worrying for the first weeks on the year of 2010.
I am going to say the conclusion, so let's start. The most complete and concise conclusion will be that everything got completely out of hand, and because of a chain reaction which went from being a bank problem to a world problem, a global problem. Really, if you think about it, all these great problems could have become the Great Depression version 2, only now on a large scale. Because although in this case there was work, prices were inflated, this caused a snowball which represents the debt. And that snowball every time gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it just goes directly to destroy the banks and the economy. I say so because of what is known as default, which means when a debt is not paid, this causes a great loss to the banks. Obviously, the bankruptcy pain was there, and it became reality when they realized that even the greatest and most powerful can fall.